Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Watkins. I serve as Associate Dean for Lifelong Learning, and I want to welcome you to Cultivating Ideas, our webinar series offered here at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary that showcases our best and our brightest faculty. And so I'm very excited for us today. My good brother and friend, Dr. Rod Caruthers, is with us. Dr. Rodney Caruthers II joined the faculty of Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 2022. He's a specialist in Second Temple Judaism with a particular focus on the formation of the diverse literature, religion, and practices of early Judaism and Christianity in antiquity. Dr. Weathers is particularly interested in the production and the function of ancient Jewish and Christian narrative literature and how the writings intersected with everyday religious beliefs and customs. His webinar today will consider the historical and theological development of Jesus as the Son of Man, along with the connections to the day of Yahweh, how Jesus was perceived as the Son of Man by his followers, and how the title informed his ministry and the formation of the early church will be considered. On a personal note, as all of you all know, last month we got the opportunity to host an event called Politics and Faith, where we showcased our best and brightest, or some of our best and brightest faculty here at Austin Seminary, and Dr. Caruthers was on that panel. He did a phenomenal job of navigating both the pastoral, the theological, and also giving us a spiritual commentary on political matters. And so he's one of those professors that does the dance, that can both speak to the academy, but the streets, as I call it. And so very excited to have him with us today. Dr. Caruthers, it is all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Watkins, for that gracious introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. And while I'm doing this, let me also just give my appreciation to Lifelong Learning and also our colleague, Michaela, for her assistance and for putting on this type of event. I think this is just a tremendous type of event that is great for our community, for our students, for our alumni. When I look at the lineup of the topics, I mean, I just smile and sometimes shake my head saying, boy, you all are getting just tremendous ideas and topics, and I can't wait for the discussion today. So this topic is one that has been of great interest to me, from suffering to glory, Jesus as the Son of Man in Mark's Gospel. My time serving in ministry, certainly my studies before coming here to Austin Seminary, this has been one of those ideas where, in order to get the understanding, we need a broader range, more sources, more ideas to trace what's happening. So the Son of Man is one of those, when we think about Christological titles, that requires this type of in-depth study. So what I'd like to do is just talk about a few ways that we can trace that development and see how it's significant for understanding, for reading, interpretation. Then I'll talk about some of the sources that we can use to do that. So throughout this, think about how we might present it, whether it's in preaching, whether it's in Bible studies. So some things will be relatively new, but I think we can address those in the discussion portion of this presentation. So let me just frame this a little bit for us. Among the Christological titles associated with Jesus of Nazareth, none are quite as enigmatic as Son of Man. Son of David, for instance, is directly connected to being a royal descendant of the second monarch of Israel. The Hebrew Mashiach, or the Greek Christos, refers to the oiliness or the anointing or chosen status of a specific character. Here's one that we have to think about when we consider this idea of the Messiah. The prophet Isaiah refers to Cyrus the Great as Yahweh's Messiah, as his Mashiach. If we were looking at the Septuagint, we would say his Christos. So Cyrus, the Persian king, is also understood as Yahweh's Messiah. Additionally, Messiah or Christ are recognizable terms used in modern vocabulary. whereas Son of Man is not. So we're talking about some of these titles that people have some reference for. Son of God, which carries its own interpretive challenges, still remains at least somewhat discernible, at least in popular theology. So most people have some sense of what Son of God means, especially when it relates to Jesus of Nazareth. Son of Man, however, tends to be an elusive character and the least accessible or understood. Our central passage for this discussion, Mark 2, 1 through 12, you are welcome to take out that passage if you have access to a Bible, Mark 2, 1 through 12. This passage illustrates the importance of the historical and literary development of this character, the Son of Man, for interpretation. Here we want to trace the development of this important figure and consider how his features align with Jesus of Nazareth in Mark's gospel, as well as other Jewish and Christian literary conceptions. So those are some ideas that we want to think about as we frame our discussion. So I won't read the entire passage, Mark 2, 1 through 12, but I do want to hone in on this section that you see on the screen. We've got a nice little image there of Jesus and the paralytic, the narrative that's here. Why do you raise such questions in your heart? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, the Greek paralytikos, your sins are forgiven, or to say, stand up and take your mat and walk? The highlighted parts are the ones that I want us to look at closely here as we consider this issue of the Son of Man. Verse 10, but so that you may know that the Son of Man, hoios to anthropou, we'll return to this idea. So we're looking at the Greek here. So that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralytic, I say to you, stand up, take your mat, and go home. Now, right away, we should have a few questions when we're thinking about tracing this concept, this idea of the Son of Man. One, in this passage, Jesus could have said, but so that you may know that the Messiah has authority on earth. Or he could have said the Son of David or the Son of God. But he actually says the Son of Man, which should raise the question, what is going on with this particular figure? The other ones that I mentioned all have their own designations and connotations. Son of Man, however, is one that we have to dive into a little bit closer. So keep in mind, we have two things mentioned, that this Son of Man that Jesus is referring to himself as can heal and has the authority to forgive sins. But where does this concept come from? So when we're thinking about the development of this idea, these are the three things that we want to consider. What's the identity of the Son of Man? What are the expectations? And what is the nature of this figure? Okay, these are the things that we should be thinking about as we go along. All of these are needed for reading and interpretation. To make sense of this passage and other mentionings of the Son of Man, these are the ideas that we should consider. Before we get to any of that consideration, however, we have to do a little bit of historical framing. And that historical framing begins in the Hebrew Bible with this notion of the kingdom of God. Now, wherever you teach, wherever you preach, however you are discussing the Bible, to talk about things in the New Testament, we need this kind of framework. Otherwise, the Son of Man makes no sense. Messiah doesn't make any sense. Son of David doesn't make any sense. without going back first and setting the context. So going back to the Hebrew Bible, the historical framework is this, that Israel has a covenant relationship with Yahweh. And these covenants set the expectations and the theology. Without these covenants, again, it's hard to discern what exactly is happening. Why does Jesus show up or Son of Man show up? So here's the situation. We have these three major covenants, the Abrahamic, the Mosaic, and Davidic. Okay, the Abrahamic covenant, this is our main that's setting up where we're going. The Abrahamic covenant in Genesis promises that the people of Israel, the Hebrews, if you will have land, offspring, and blessings. They will be blessed, and the people who bless them will be blessed. Okay. This is the main one. I put the map over to the right there just for us to visualize. This is the idea. Now, we've got other issues with they took the land from other people and that sort of thing. But let's just stay with the narrative for a moment that this was the promised land. Okay? The Mosaic covenant, this was the one with Moses. This is your Torah, the instructions or the law. We see this detailed in places like Exodus. The Mosaic covenant, just to keep it together, keep it real straightforward, this is essentially their constitution. How they're to live with each other and how they are to relate to the God of Israel. So these are their rules. This is their constitution, their law for living in their land. Right? The Davidic covenant, the third one. This one is essentially an addendum to the Abrahamic covenant. So again, you have your land, you have your constitution, and eventually there is a request for a human king. And this one promises that they will have an eternal ruler and kingdom. Okay? So they're moving from a theocracy where the God of Israel is, if you will, their king. Then they have a human king, which makes it a monarchy, a single rule, and where you have Saul, David, Solomon. Eventually this gets divided up. But what you are seeing is, in effect, the kingdom of God. Note that this is a physical kingdom on the earth. Okay? Land, law, and a king. The worldview is that you would have prosperity during this life. So all of your blessings are received during this lifetime. When you die, when you transition, when you go on, you simply go to Sheol. The idea of an afterlife that develops later. But at least at this point, which we would call ancient Israelite religion, this is the kingdom of God, and this is the essential framework of expectations. Now, we get a new predicament. Okay? What you're seeing on the screen, the highlighted things are what you should hone in on here. The new predicament, based on the promises, which was land, living by the Torah, and having an eternal kingdom. All of this becomes a point of catastrophic events, if you will, occur that upsets all of these promises. They are defeated and exiled. We see the defeat with Assyria and Babylon, 722 and 586 BCE. When this occurs, the promises with those three covenants are upended. They are displaced, and they can no longer live out the Torah properly. And more importantly, they are being ruled by Gentiles, and they are not receiving the promises. These are the major issues that they're facing under this new predicament once they are defeated by the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Okay? During this time, a hope for deliverance begins to shape, a hope for the God of Israel, for Yahweh, to restore the kingdom to its former glory. This is where eventually, not just yet, but eventually, we start to get this expectation of a messianic figure, an anointed one in some way, but not quite. The last bullet point. We see this development of something called the day of the Lord, the day when Yahweh will intervene and restore the earth, or in some cases, restore the kingdom to its former glory. When it's restoring the earth, it's kind of back to this kind of a scene like we see in Eden, in the Garden of Eden in Genesis. Okay, so the new predicament upends the promises, and now there's a development for hope for restoration. Here is where this is kind of the main piece for understanding the Son of Man. The connection with the Son of Man comes in this idea, the concept of the day of the Lord, or the day of Yahweh. Okay? That hope for restoration. Get rid of the Gentiles, be able to live out the Torah again and receive the promises. This idea is centered in the day of the Lord, where the expectation is that Yahweh will intervene in human history at some point in the future. He will punish the wicked, that is the Gentiles, punishes those who break the Torah. There's some sort of judgment or retribution for good and for bad. Key point is Yahweh is the judge, the one who does all of this. We see either a restored earth or a restored kingdom. That is a monarchy. And this, again, would still be a physical kingdom at this point. Later on, we start to see ideas of a cosmic kingdom, things in the heavens, that sort of thing. But for the most part, a restored earthly kingdom. Perhaps some sort of resurrection. It's often associated with the end of the age, okay, the eschaton. And we see this association with the end of the age with passages like Malachi 4:5-6, where there is this promise that Elijah will return just before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Yom Adonai, this day of the Lord. So this is the concept that's usually missing for the Son of Man. Here are some examples of the day of the Lord, how they're thinking about this in prophetic books. Okay, Yom Adonai is your, I don't know if you all can see my cursor there. I think you can. Yom Adonai, for a day is near, the day of the Lord. Yom Adonai is near. It will be a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. Okay? Another one, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. The third one, for the day of the Lord, Yom Adonai, is near against all the nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your own head. Okay. So we're seeing part of this expectation once they've been displaced and this hope develops. This is part of the idea, the day of the Lord, where things will be restored and set right again. But notice, all of this is happening with Yahweh alone. There's no other figure, just Yahweh. Yahweh is, in fact, the judge, the righteous judge at that. Psalm 7:11, God is a righteous judge and a God who has indignation every day. Psalm 9:7-8, but the Lord abides forever. He has established his throne for mishpat, for judgment. And he will judge, yishpot, the world in righteousness. He will execute judgment, yadin, for the peoples with iniquity. I show this because it's important to note that Yahweh is the judge associated with the end of the age. We'll see why that's important in just a moment. Okay. Those are the initial ideas. Day of the Lord, Yahweh as judge. Then eventually we get a development in ideas where we have this figure called the Son of Man. I have this slide up first because we don't start with what we're going to see in a moment. We usually see Son of Man, or we see it initially referring to human beings. Okay, so uses of the Son of Man, the Hebrew would be Ben Adam. We'll come to this again, but Ben is just son, and Adam is used for Adam in Genesis. But remember, Adam can also mean like ground or earth, but can also mean just man or mankind for the Hebrew. So Ben Adam, son of Adam or son of man, can be used for humans like kings here. In Psalm 8:4, what is man that thou takest thought of him, and the son of man, the Ben Adam, that you care for him. It can also be used towards prophets. We see this with Ezekiel. Then he said to me, son of man, Ben Adam, I'm sending you out to the sons of Israel, etc. Okay. So one use of son of man is simply for human beings. Now we get to the further development. And we start one of our earliest, I would say our earliest use of Son of Man outside of a regular human figure would be in Daniel 7:9-14. This is where we begin our development of the Son of Man and how these things will eventually align with Jesus of Nazareth. So Daniel 7:9-14, we see some of these features: the Ancient of Days, a courtroom setting, books and scrolls being opened. And then we have this very interesting wording here in Aramaic, one like a son of man. And we'll put this passage up in just a second. So kevar and nash. There's your Aramaic here, kevar and nash. As or like a son, bar, anash, son of man. The Septuagint gives us the same type of nuance, hos huios anthropou, like or as a son of man. Daniel is important because this is our starting point for the literary and theological development of this figure. Here's our passage. And here's where we begin our tracing. So everything else was the setup to connect Day of the Lord, Yahweh, etc., so that we can make sense of the Son of Man. As I watched, thrones were set in place. So pay attention to what we have in red. Thrones were set in place, and an ancient one took his throne. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair on his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. The court sat in judgment. So take note of the things that we're observing, what sorts of things that we're seeing. This is what I was pointing out here. So the setting in the passage. The court sat in judgment, and the books or the scrolls were opened. As I watched in the night visions, I saw one, some translations will say, like a human being. We're trying to be a little bit more literal here. The Aramaic has kevar and nash, one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. Okay. Here are the observations from this. So we have one like a son of man, kevar nash, comes with the clouds of heaven, presented before the Ancient of Days, that is Yahweh. We see that he has some sort of eternal kingship. Glory and dominion are given to him. It's not entirely clear if he's heavenly, divine, or angelic, but he seems to be something more than just a regular human being. Remember, he's like a son of man. Okay? That's our starting point in Daniel. So all of a sudden we have this figure, this Bar Enosh, that is now with Yahweh in a judgment setting. And if you look at that whole context of Daniel, we see this is a judgment setting. Books are opened. Eventually, they start talking about resurrected ones coming up out of the dust, etc. So we know it's something happening in the heavens. Now, that idea begins to get developed more and more in what we call Second Temple literature, like collections that scholars call the pseudepigrapha. We can talk about more of this in the discussion, but writings like First Enoch, the Testament of Solomon, and 4 Ezra are the ones that I want to show you just to get a sense of how these sorts of things are presented and how they develop. If we were doing a Bible study, here's how we would do it. We'd look at something like the Parables of Enoch, which is from the 1st century BCE. This is a nice copy of that in Greek over to the right. And what we would do is we would read each of these and start detailing what do we see about this Son of Man figure. So in the Parables of Enoch, the things that I have highlighted in yellow are the things that are in common with what we see in Daniel. Then we would start looking at the things that are a little bit different. Now, brace yourself, I'm giving you a chart, okay? The chart is now just giving you a quick summary of the things that I've broken out, parsed out for each of these texts. For Daniel, 6th century BCE, 1st Enoch, Testament of Abraham, and for 4 Ezra. What we would do if we're doing this study together is we would look at each of these columns: designation, arrival, location, ruler. Are they enthroned? Is it a judgment scene? And then what's the nature of the figure? For Daniel, for designation, for instance, in Daniel, he's one like a son of man, a Bar Enosh. In 1st Enoch, he's identified as son of man and as Enoch, the figure who's translated and walks with the Lord and then is translated in Genesis. So we get a designation here. Testament of Abraham, he's referred to as the son of Adam, the Ben Adam, which we mentioned earlier, but he's actually Abel. Abel is the figure that is the Son of Man. Okay? And then in 4 Ezra, this figure is just named as a figure of a man. And what we would do is go across and look at all of the differences and the development of this figure and what are their similarities. Are they pre-existent? Are they enthroned? Are they presented as a ruler? How do they come? So we look at the differences and the similarities. Here from that chart, here are some of the things that we see when we kind of look at everything together. So some general expectations of the Son of Man. This figure is presented before the Ancient of Days, that is Yahweh. This figure is maybe heavenly or angelic, seems to be pre-existent, usually comes on the clouds, defeats their enemies, is enthroned in the heavens, judges humanity, and weighs deeds in the balances. That's where you have these books being opened and this sort of judgment scene. We see this even in things like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where we have a judgment scene. The balance is here. This is the Egyptian god Osiris and the royal scribe Ani being brought by Anubis before Thoth and being judged. Down here to the left, we have the Greek judgment scene with the 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchos. They are the ones who judge deeds. So just to note that this idea of judgment is across different cultures. Okay. I'm about to bring this home. I'm looking at my time here, 12:34. All right, so Son of Man similarities. What we'll do here is look at some similarities and differences with the Son of Man, how these things connect to Jesus of Nazareth. So here are some similarities. coming on the clouds. We see this in Daniel 7:13. Right? So we read this one already. We also see in 4 Ezra, and behold, look, the wind caused, the wind caused to come up out of the heart of the seas, as it were the form of a man, and I beheld, and lo, this man flew with the clouds of heaven. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. So we can see in Daniel, 4 Ezra, and in Matthew, this commonality of this figure coming on the clouds. We also see another commonality, another similarity, seated on a throne as judge in 1 Enoch, and the Lord of spirits placed the elect one, that is the Son of Man, on the throne of glory, and he shall judge all the works of the holy above in heaven. And in the balance shall their deeds be weighed, sort of like what we saw with the Greek and Egyptian saints. The testament of Abraham, the commander-in-chief said, do you see all pious Abraham, the frightful man who is seated on the throne? This is the son of Adam, the firstborn, who is called Abel, whom Cain the wicked killed. And he sits here to judge the entire creation, examining both righteous and sinners. And then in Matthew and John, we have these parallels here. In Matthew, the Son of Man comes in his glory, and he will sit on his throne of glory and separate the sheep from the goats. In John, just as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself, and he has given him authority to execute judgment, because he is the Son of Man. Another similarity is this Son of Man being a heavenly figure. We saw this in Daniel, presented before the Ancient of Days. In Enoch, he's like one of the holy ones, also pre-existent with the head of days. And then in John, no one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from it. Those are some similarities. We could go into more, but let's note some differences. How is Jesus different from the presentation of these other figures? In Daniel, the Son of Man, or one like a Son of Man, lives forever. His dominion is everlasting, doesn't pass away, won't be destroyed. This is different from the way that the Son of Man is presented in, let's say, the Gospel of John, where there's even a question. Jesus is explaining how he has to die. And the question is, we've heard from the law that the Messiah remains forever. We'll get to this in a second. How do we have Messiah and Son of Man? How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? So there's a question about the Son of Man dying. Jesus, of course, is identified as the Son of Man. We see this again in John. Jesus heard that they had driven him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have seen him. The one speaking with you is he. Another difference would be, and this is a key one for us, that the day of the Lord becomes the day of the Lord Jesus Christ. We see this in 1 Corinthians 1:8. And instead of Yahweh coming, it's now Jesus who is coming at the end. We see this both in 1 Thessalonians and in Revelation. There is a conflation of these titles, Son of David, Son of Man, Messiah, Son of God, whereas in Second Temple literature, all of these figures are unique. They're all different, but in Jesus, they all come together. This is another major difference where we have him understood as Messiah, Son of Man, and Son of God. We do not see that with the others. In Mark, the things that I have highlighted for us are the things that are different from these other characters. The Son of Man forgives sins, is Lord of the Sabbath, suffers, and is resurrected. The other ones are similar to these other characters. Comes on the clouds with power, inaugurates a new kingdom or rules in some sort of way, and is enthroned. These are the things that we see in Mark's gospel. Now, here's a bonus one before we move into our discussion. The bonus one is we have a figure who is not called the Son of Man, but is associated with the end of the age and functions like the Son of Man. And this is a character called Melchizedek, who we see in Genesis, Psalms, and Hebrews. We have a very interesting writing in the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Qumran Scrolls called The Coming of Melchizedek, 11Q13, from around the 1st or 2nd century BCE. This figure is understood as being divine, comes at the end of the age, forgives sins. Here's a connection to Jesus of Nazareth. Judges the world and Belial. Over to your right is a fragment of the coming of Melchizedek. And here's a portion of that. We have Melchizedek who will return. He proclaims the Jubilee, releases them from the debt of all their sins. Okay? He's part of this kingdom of judgment. He is understood as an Elohim, a godlike figure, takes his place in the council of God where he holds judgment. So this is a figure who is not called Son of Man, but functions like the Son of Man, someone who appears at the end of the age and executes judgment. So back to our three observations, things that we wanted to pay attention to. The identity of the Son of Man, we see three figures, Enoch, Jesus, and Abel. And then we have a bonus figure, Melchizedek, who functions sort of like them. The expectations of the Son of Man, he comes on the clouds, pretty much at the end of the age, executes judgment, is enthroned, forgives sins, and suffers is something unique to Jesus and Melchizedek. The nature of the Son of Man is still a little bit murky, where he could be heavenly or pre-existent. So what we're looking at here are just some ways that we would trace that development of the concept. So when we're reading the New Testament, we have some of this background. Jesus doesn't just appear all of a sudden in the New Testament, and he's not the only image of Son of Man. So when we're reading and interpreting, we have these other texts that show some of that development. These are just some questions that would be interesting for discussion, but I definitely want to get some of you all's ideas. These are just some texts. I can put this back up on screen later on, or you can come back and look at the recording. I'm plugging some of my colleagues who have written on the Son of Man, and then some other sources that would be great for your study on this topic. I'm going to stop right here because I want to give more time for our discussion. But thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Caruthers. Appreciate that, man. Just really, 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 really helpful. I greatly appreciate it. I remember do my hosting responsibilities. So as you've been listening, you have an amazing opportunity. If you want to be able to respond, want to invite you to be able to get those questions ready and drop those in the chat. We're going to ask, if you do want to ask a question audibly, if you want to verbally ask your question, I want to ask you both to unmute and then also to turn your camera on as we are recording, and we want to make sure that we've got the visuals for that. It doesn't look as pristine when we have folks that are asking questions, but their cameras are not on. It just doesn't show up as best. And so we want to make sure that we record that in its totality. For folks that are getting ready, and I see your mom already has a question in the chat. I love when family shows up. I think as we're getting ready with that, my question is, so this title, this nomenclature, the Son of Man that Jesus is referenced as. Remember when I first saw it and really kind of it caught my attention was when I was just kind of doing a deep dive in the book of Ezekiel a couple of years ago. And then I love the masterful way in which you talked about it. There's canonical representation of that in the text, and then also outside the text as well too, in terms of books of Ezra, etc. Um, my question is around those original hearers, right? You look in Acts 17, and Paul's going around Athens and says, "You've got statues for all the gods, but you've got something about this unknown God. Let me tell you about him." All
Right.
of this to kind of notice in the scriptures, as you've mentioned as well, too, with Matthew and Luke, they've got Jewish audiences. They're going to give a genealogy. For Mark and John, they're talking to Gentiles. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob mean nothing, right? So they're not even going to do those. The Son of Man, that title, what are those original hearers? What was that a signal to them? Was that someone that this title is unfamiliar, but historically it's meant something we should pay attention? When he references himself as the Son of Man, did it make those early disciples stop and pay attention? Because they knew both in Jewish culture and in canon that if someone uses this and they aren't struck down, this is someone that we need to pay attention to. Talk to us for a second about the culture in that time and what it meant for them to be able to hear the Son of Man and to hear Jesus reference himself as that.
Excellent. Beautiful question. Yeah. So what I was doing with the presentation was showing that background. So
Mm-hmm.
as when we see that used in the New Testament,
Mm-hmm.
the background that we see in First Enoch, in the Testament of Abraham, in 4 Ezra, even though those are later texts, they're still representing the development of the idea that we saw even in Daniel.
Yeah.
So when they're hearing something like Son of Man, they were probably thinking about this character who shows up at the end of the age that's associated with executing judgment, which we see Jesus bringing that up, the passages that I referenced there. Jesus is saying, hey, this is the Son of Man who's coming on the clouds. So at least some idea, we would imagine that the readers of these texts, especially things like the Gospels, that when they're seeing Son of Man, they're saying, oh yeah, this is an idea that at least was circulating to some extent, starting with what we saw in Daniel,
Yeah.
associated with the end time, with executing judgment, and something with maybe a restoration of the kingdom. But again, it's challenging because they also develop an idea of Messiah,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I mentioned. They eventually conflate those ideas, Son of Man and Messiah, together.
Mm. That is fascinating, man. I appreciate you sharing that too. It just the historian in me is always like, what did they hear and kind of what's going on? And it's amazing to me as I listen to you just how indicative of yeah, it may be new, but it's never new, right? Like there is this person that comes on, whether they're authentic or whether they are not, right? But what they say and how they describe themselves, people either run to them or run from them, and those that run to them for either noble or ignoble purposes. So I love that as well too. And that notion of the Son of Man has all these connotations. They're looking for Messiah, and at some point those get conflated. And that's where the real fun begins, air quotes.
Mhm.
We've got a question from someone in the chat. Uh, Dr. Caruthers asks, Dr. Caruthers, in what ways can the understanding of Jesus as the Son of Man speak to contemporary theological concerns? How does this title offer insights into Jesus' relationship with humanity and his role in redemption? And I'll read them again for you. In what ways can the understanding of Jesus as the Son of Man speak to contemporary theological concerns? How does this title offer insights into Jesus' relationship with humanity and his role in redemption? Excellent questions.
Yeah, very, very good question. The first part, how does it speak to contemporary theological concerns? I would say, um, again, this was a very brief overview just to kind of wet someone's whistle to what's out there or what to consider. So theologically, we would say, okay, when we read Son of Man, let's just say in the Gospel of Mark and some other gospel, we would at least be aware that, okay, this concept, this wording has a historical and literary background to it. So understanding, aha, looks like this is a figure associated with the end of the age, restoration, judgment, etc., etc. You would want to at least consider that theological framework and how it developed.
Mhm.
to say, okay, if I'm reading about Jesus of Nazareth in the New Testament, how should I understand his ministry and the expectations that were held at that time? It's different if you want to say, I don't care about what they thought back then. I only want to think about what I think today. That's fine. But if you're looking to understand things from a historical context, you would at least consider that. Now, the other one, how does this title offer insight into his relationship with humanity and his role in redemption? If one is going to take the understanding that we see in the Gospels, and again, that development of the concept, then we have to say, okay, what exactly was the hope? So that's why I started off with that framework, some sort of restoration, either of the world or some sort of physical kingdom that again develops. Different Jewish sects, different Christian sects will develop that idea, whether it's something cosmic or something physical. So some sort of hope for a better existence, better future, and some righting of the wrong and judgment that comes with that. These are the ideas. Of course, people living today may not agree with some of those things. That's fine, but at least be aware of the concepts that were circulating at that stage and stages before. I don't know if that answers everything or if you want to follow up.
Yeah, that's absolutely excellent. I love that response as well, too. And again, we've got a little bit of time to folks have questions in the chat. Trying to turn these into my own personal Bible studies because all of our professors are speaking, and I always have questions about these concepts. I loved your response to Dr. Caruthers' question. Your mom, Reverend Dr. Caruthers, so I'm not confusing folks who are listening to the recording later on. I think my question kind of piggybacking off of her. So this concept, this notion of the Son of Man, I think I'm curious, like in it's both happening in contemporary society today, but I feel like it's also happening in the text as well too. There's that old adage that everybody wants to preach Jesus, but we don't often preach what Jesus preached.
Oh,
And I'm wondering in the text as well too, as you talk about the implications, both Old and New Testaments, historical context, what we see in Ezra, what we see in Daniel, what we see in Ezekiel, what we see in Mark's gospel. Um, like you said, like when someone hears the Son of Man, that should conjure up a historical or a contextual, a theological, all of them, an eschatological, all the academic and pastoral categories. It should conjure up a number of things. But then again, to your concluding point as well, too, they conflated the Son of Man and the Messiah. Why do you think that the Son of Man, if it has such powerful imagery as you're arguing, which we believe that it did, why is it that this powerful imagery of what the Son of Man represents, why does that get reduced to a Christian national identity? Why does it get reduced to, oh, the Son of Man is coming. He's going to kill the Romans and restore our empire. And then that way we'll just continue to do what we were doing before, which is disobey God in every other chapter. Why does that, and I guess I'm trying to figure out the question, why does it get reduced and that holy fear disappears? It
yeah. Oh,
comes back to power, but it never comes back to discipleship, never comes back to transformation. You were very gracious at the end. You said, folks might not even agree with this today. And that's
yeah.
kind of the point. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's going on there? Why are we seeing this shift happening both in scripture and in society to where we want Jesus, we want the Lord to vanquish our enemies. We really don't want him to deal with kind of the issues that is going on in our own hearts and lives and families. So good pastoral question, just a softball.
Oh, yeah. Oh no, I mean you actually were dealing with one. I think when I zip past my discussion questions there. So eventually, this Son of Man wording falls out of favor.
Mm.
It sort of goes away, even in antiquity. They keep Son of God, they keep Son of David, and they keep Messiah, Christ. They like those, but Son of Man kind of goes away. And
Mm.
part of it going away is, and I think we'll probably understand this piece well. Once you come into power, you're good. Once you become the dominating
Mm.
the empire, the Christian empire and things, who wants a new kingdom? You got it now. It's your kingdom. Now you're running the show. You don't need it. You don't need Jesus to come back too quickly and execute judgment and all of this. No, it's better to keep things, they're not going to say that, but the idea is we're empowering them. So the initial idea was, if you're martyred and, you better keep everything together because he'll be back next week. That was the initial idea, but once it took longer and longer, and eventually Christianity, 4th century or so, becomes the Christian empire and Constantine and everything, that idea dies out to a certain degree, at least. Gnostics do something different with Son of Man, but eventually, the whole notion of a figure coming executing judgment, the theology is still there, but the emphasis is not the same as in prior times. So that idea just kind of goes away to a certain extent.
My goodness, that's really, really, really helpful. It's fascinating to hear the historical context and how theology at one point is kind of leading the conversation, the dialogue. And then once folks get access to power, the gospel more or less accomplishes its purpose in that it arrives at social and societal transformation for the benefit and flourishing of all. But then those who once were powerless and then become powerful, then it's Deuteronomy, it's Old Testament. Once you take the promised land, do not forget the Lord your God. And we always do. That's fascinating that Messiah and Son of God stay in our lexicon, both theologically and in the West as well, too. But Son of Man disappears for its implications. My goodness. That's a great place for us to be able to pause. If you've got more questions about that, Dr. Caruthers' email address is on our website. You can also email, I'm kidding, but if you've got questions about that, please, by all means, email us at Lifelong Learning or Learn for Life, rather at austinseminary.edu. We always want to take questions for those things. It helps to shape our topics and discussions as well, too. Hopefully, and I believe it's true, this has sparked some questions inside of you as well, too. And that's what theological education is about. There are a number of free resources that are available. blueletterbible.org is a great one. You can also check out the library here at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, or any theological seminaries or online resources. If you're curious about more of this broader discussion about the Son of Man, its implications, both culturally and historically, I'm very curious about it. And so I want to continue learning. Dr. Caruthers, thank you immensely for leading us in this discussion today. And I want to invite everyone to join us next week as Dr. David Jensen, our professor in the Clarence N. and Betty B. Frierson Distinguished Chair of Reformed Theology, discusses the elements of Christian faith, flesh and blood. Does Christian symbolism and language about blood perpetuate or subvert the patterns of blood and violence in our wider culture? Tune in for an exploration of an element of Christian faith that is central but often avoided because it seems too bloody. So again, we're going to have a fantastic discussion next week as well. Look forward to you all joining us. Dr. Caruthers, thank you again, and take care, everyone. Hope you have a fantastic day.
Thank you all.